Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in different grades, dear guests, it's a sincere pleasure for me to invite you today to the 2025 RS Med in the Palais Neptune. As the person responsible for organizing this, I'd like to welcome you because we're going to have a great 2 days with a lot of information, a lot of interesting discussions. This reflects the ambition that the FMES has for our meetings. We have brought together today many different authorities from the civilian sector and many from the military sector, and researchers from 25 different countries, students and industrial players from the defense industry, from far away and nearby, who are major players in the strategic events of our era. This is one of the strengths of the FMED, always having open dialogues and different viewpoints of the world today. The geopolitics in the world, of course, has once again taken hold of us with a great deal of intensity. We've seen that today, that there's increased rivalry between different countries and rivalities and different hybrid conflicts. And once these certainties are more and more fractured, we have to take time to understand, to analyze, and also to take time to discuss these problems. Whether it be France or the European Union, or also the countries to the south of Europe, we have to rethink our place in the world and our partnerships and our priorities. These meetings that we have in the next 2 days were designed with this in mind. We want to offer a privileged space, a time for us to take a step back and talk and have open discussions and talk about the different strategic ideas can be discussed, and where we can talk about all the different issues through serious discussions. We're not trying to reshape the world. We're trying to understand it. We're trying to share our experiences and our knowledge and our intuitions, and at a high level of discussion. Okay. I'd also like to talk to the students here who are present today, and students, more and more of you are coming each year, which is a great news for us. These meetings are also for you. We want to inspire you and give you the keys to understanding what's happening in our world. I would also like to thank, in particular for this 4th edition, to warmly thank all of you who made this possible, and which you will see on the screen behind me. The South region, first of all, which has been a faithful partner of the FMED, which has been part of our strategic reflections for years. The Department of the VAR, the PPN Metropolitan, also the ministers of the armies and the foreign affairs ministries, who have also helped us as well. I'd also like to thank the FRS, the Foundation for Strategic Research, who has been a support for us unwavering since it starts. And I'd also like to thank all our academic and institutional partners, NATO, also the Wadorsstiftung, also our media partners, and as far as the geopolitical work, the GHDN, and also the KNUF. I would also like to thank our industrial partners, MBDA, Thales, Airbus, Naval Group, Ariane Group, Excel, and Orange Cyberdefense, who have contributed to making these meetings what they are. We'll have 2 intense days with a lot of information, a lot of debates, a lot of questions, and I hope you'll learn a lot. I'd also like you to take advantage of everything that these 2 days have to offer, listen, participate in the debates, and get involved. We'll be using the Slido system, which will enable each of you to interact with our different speakers for the different panels. In all the different rooms, there's a QR code that will enable you to connect to this platform. And finally, before I begin our meeting this morning, I'd like to give you a little idea of what we'll be talking about today. I'd like to draw your attention to Pierre Bimon, who will be speaking right here in this amphitheater at 2 o'clock, and also the roundtable discussions with the 3 heads of the French Chief of Staff, who will also be here this afternoon in the same amphitheater. Now we're going to start with our introductory sequence for FSMed. So it's my honor to call up onto side François de Canson, who is Vice President of the Alsatian, Guillaume Descartes, who is the Vice President of the VAR Department, Xavier Pasco, who is General Director of the FRS, and Pascal Ausseur, who is the Director of the FMES.
He said to just, you understand, to...
Okay, we're not necessarily in the same order as you see on the PowerPoint screen, but that's okay. I think you can recognize this. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming to be so numerous here today for the 4th edition of EROSMED. I think we broke the record this year. We stopped accepting new people coming. 3,600 people signed up for the 2 days, which is huge. And as Marie-Caroline said, this is a sincere pleasure for us because it means that the French, and not just the French, but Europeans as well, people from the Middle East and from Africa, people of the 25 different countries represented here today, all share our analysis that the world in which we live is now struck by a historic rupture. There's one it happens in every era, and ours is right now. And for 4 years now, we've been saying this at each yearly event. Each time we get the feeling that that things are getting more and more palpable. And that's why we called this introductory panel La Spirale s'accélère, which means that the idea is that things are spiraling a bit out of control and speeding up. And this is something the message I want to get across. This is actually the name of the last strategic document that we published on our site. So it's free, you can download that. And it gives some explanations about how things are spiraling out of control. Because this year things are accelerating. And they've also degraded. We could even say that the rubber band has broken. Of course, it's much easier to say afterwards than ahead of time. But if it's not broken, it's been getting stretched very, very tight. So we might have gone a point of no return. But to what degree? It's very hard to say. And that's why you have to be very prudent when you talk about things like that. And that's why, as I want to say, this first meeting we have in the first 2 days is definitely a point I want to get across this morning to you, is to talk about it's hard to say what's going to happen in the future. I can't say what's going to happen. If someone who says they think what's going to happen, they might be a liar. I don't think any of us can predict the future and say, oh, it's so easy. Here's how are things going to happen. No, we're faced with a historic rupture. And that's why we have to work on our collective intelligence. And why is that? First of all, because this breakdown that we've been describing, that we talked about in the past few years at these meetings, has gotten worse. These centrifugal forces that are tearing us all apart, even in our own societies, which I'm sure you're all aware of, but also between different communities, different states, between different cultures and different civilizations. This centrifugal force, it truly does exist. And I think we all would agree on that point. And we can feel that this is going to go on for the decades and maybe even generations to come. And yet, at the same time, the interdependence between 8 billion people on the same planet, when I was born, we were only 3 billion. So in a single generation, we've increased from 3 to 8 billion people. That's increased a lot of different interactions and a lot more friction. So at the same time, there's divergence, and at the same time, there's increasing number of interactions between the people on the planet. So if we talk about these 8 billion people on the planet, of course, that leads to the question of resources, of living together. We're all aware of this, of course. One of the key words that describes the world, too, is scarcity. There's not enough for everybody. In any case, that's the feeling that a lot of us have. And we start to have this idea that there's not enough for everybody, all of a sudden tensions increase. That also explains why the world is the way it is today. A world in which a Hobbesian way we can think about it. Hobbes was a thinker from the early 18th century, 17th, 18th century, I think, who talked about the wars of religion, said, we can't go on this way. At the time, he was only talking about your problems. But in fact, it's similar to the problems we have today. And in his theories, he talked about the nature that we're all against each other. We're back to nature, and as Hobbes said, it's everyone for themselves. And as Hobbes said, the only way to avoid civil war, which was he was talking about in Europe at that time, is to have a strong countries, strong states who put in place order and stabilize everything. And I think that's where we are right now. That's my opinion. Again, you have to be prudent in talking about that. We're in a very chaotic period right now where there's a lot of tension. And at the same time, we're going to see new strong states who are going to clean up the house, you might say. And we're kind of in a transitory phase right now. And a lot of countries wanted this to happen. They want to have their part of the pie. They want to have their part of the pie to increase their autonomy and to be part of the club, of the elite club, of the, we might talk of the big countries, the major powers, the medium powers, and the small powers. And of course, if you're left behind, if you're one of the small powers, then you'll be a prey for the other ones. That's the first point I wanted to make. What does that mean for France? Because we're in France. What does it mean for Europe, since we're in Europe? Because what is the subject then for Europeans? There's two consequences which cause a lot of problems for us, or in any case, that'll have negative impacts for Europe. One is for the geopolitical questions. What I've just described is a place where strong states are coming back, the place where the interest of each state, of each country, is predominant, and where they are in opposition. When we talk about the rapport of strengths, ratio of strengths between different countries. So we're in a geopolitical world, as you might say it. But after World War II, Europe had built itself based on, we wanted to get rid of this geopolitical questions. We didn't want to just consider ourselves separate states. We wanted to have a world based on free trade, a world in which everybody wouldn't just consider themselves a part of their own country, but also part of an international community that we could all be part of. That was something we wanted to get to do back after the war, and I thought that was very utopic, but it was a good idea. But in fact, it doesn't correspond to what's happening today. And that's a problem, because the world that we have today is not the world we expected not too long ago. That's the first point. The second point, if we talk about this Big Bang, it's a problem for Europe, because we were in the main convergence. Everyone's converging towards Europe. We were the center in Europe. After we talked about the Western world, when it shifted towards the United States at the end of the 19th century and early 20th century, and then we talked just about the West being United States and the Europe. But now it's a Big Bang. There's no center. In any case, Europe is no longer the center, and we have actually been marginalized, and that's a problem for us. Also an intellectual problem, because the world has a lot of European aspects to it, but we're no longer the center. So now we're seeing alternative ways, different points of views, alternative viewpoints. And now we're getting the feeling in Europe that we're not longer the center of the world, and that people are not listening to us, and people don't understand us. I'd like us to show the picture that I wanted to show, kind of illustrate the point I just made. Okay, hopefully you'll be able to see it. It's a picture of the 25th summit of the Shanghai Cooperative Organization, which took place 3 weeks in Shanghai. I hope we can get a look at that picture. It took place 3 weeks before the General Assembly of the United Nations. And you have all of Europe and Asia in this picture. It was a summit organized by China. You have all the leaders from in Europe, Asia, all the way through Turkey, China, of course, and a large portion of Southeast Asia. Because when you talk about Eurasia, that's a very big area. And also part of the Middle East as well. So the first characteristic of this picture that you can't see, but hopefully you'll be able to see it, the first thing you'll notice is that there's no Westerners in there, either by definition, and by definition, no Europeans, no one from the West, which illustrates what I just said. Of course, right in the center of the portrait is Xi Jinping and Putin in Russia, who did not come to the General Assembly of the United Nations, because it was more important for them to be in Shanghai than in New York. That's also a sign of our times. The third characteristic is at top of the picture. Sorry, we can't see it. There's a sentence in English which says, for a multiplication of civilization. Here we go. Now you can see it. So you can see on the top, it says, respect for a diversity of civilizations. That's exactly what I just said. How we decentralized and we've de-Europeanized the world. And that has not done with that. We haven't drawn all the conclusions from that aspect of the world. It's said very clearly here. Now you can see in the picture here, as you see, another point is also kind of on the side, is there are a few women, but all the women you see there are wives. There's not a single woman who is the head of a state, of a country. So that tells us other things about this new world. In a sense, if you saw the G7, there would be a few women, maybe not that many, but it would not have been wives, at least, at the G7, even if there are not a lot of female leaders. Well, that shows us that if the people at the OS, the Organization of Shanghai, wanted to put a few women on there, they probably thought the picture would look better if there were a few women on there. A last thing I wanted to add, which is also a perfect illustration. You can see a person on the way over on the right there. You see a guy. That's Antonio Guterres, who is the Secretary General of the UN. He's way, way, way over at the end there. And you can see he's kind of leaning over to make sure he got in the frame of the picture. We wonder what he's even doing there, actually. He looks like he doesn't even know what he's doing there, actually. And that's very characteristic. He did come to the OSS. They put him at the end of the picture, but it's Xi Jinping and Putin who are right in the center of the picture, who did not come to the General Assembly of the UN at New York. I think that picture itself is a perfect illustration of the second important point, is the de-Westernization and de-Europeanization of the world. And the next point that also marks the world today, at least in my impression, and the scoop of the year, even if it's not really a scoop, as we kind of thought this was going to happen, is in the United States, who has renounced on saving the old world. And this should make us think about it. We felt it coming, but the United States was kind of the boss of the old world, the heads of the old world. And now they've gone back into the camp of the people, what they call revisionists, even if that's a negative connotation to be revisionist. But the United States, we can say today, that they've gotten the feeling that they were losing their strength, that the trend was too strong and irreversible. And they said, okay, there's a new world arriving, up to us to take our own position, to have the best possible position in this new world, to be one of the part of the hegemonic leaders of this new world. And this is something we need to think about as well. So this is an impact for us, as Europeans. There is a clear cleavage right now. I think the last one was after the Cold War, or after, we could say, even in the Middle Ages. For 1,000 years, there was a difference between the West and the East, and now we can see it happening again. It's the end of the West, you might say, and we have to draw conclusions from this, us as Europeans. And now, just to give my last idea of this geopolitical tour around Europe, is what's happening for us in Europe is a kind of an existential question, you might say. The world that we have today is not the world we wanted, and it's not very favorable for us, but it's here. We'll have to deal with it. And we're going to have to adapt to the world and the way it is. We're at a really Darwinian moment in our world. It's not the strongest that'll win. It's not the most intelligent. It's not even maybe not the most courageous, even if those are characteristics we need. It might be the ones who can adapt the best. The ones who can adapt the best. The dinosaurs died, let's remember. They didn't know how to adapt. But there were a lot of tiny little animals who were less powerful than the dinosaurs who survived. We're in a Darwinian moment such as this today for Europe. We really have to adapt in Europe, and we have to think. And that's why we're here today. And I'd like to thank you again for having come today. So now I'm going to pass the microphone over to my colleagues here for this panel. To my left, there's someone who I think some of you know well, who is François de Canson, who is the Vice President of the South Region and works with Muselier, Professor Muselier, who's in charge of the economic aspects, which is also a mayor of La Lande-des-Morts, a small town near Toulon. To his left, we have Guillaume Descartes, who's Vice President of the Department of the Var, which is where we are today, in the Var. Toulon is in the Var, in the south region of France. And as you've understood, we can have a strategic vision which goes beyond just Paris. France does not mean Paris. So we're very proud to have these officials here today, these elected officials here today. And that's why they're more than welcome here today. He is representing Jean Masson, the president of the VAR. And to our left, someone else who you know well, who is Xavier Pascal, an old friend of mine from FSMED, who is the general director of the FRS, the Foundation for Strategic Research. who has right from the get-go has been kind enough, and also to not just his kindness but also his intelligence, has to help us to put in place this event out of Paris, on the coast of the Mediterranean, right onto a different area where this fracture, as we're talking about in the world, is happening here in the Mediterranean region as well. And it will help us to think about what happens around us, talking about where we are today, here in the Mediterranean basin. And this is something he keenly understood right from the start, and I'd like to thank him for his support, unwavering support since we've gotten started. And so it's a question I'm asking all three of you. What is your vision of the world today? Why are we here? From your position, as people, as politicians, or also who are members of a French think tank, how would you analyze today's world? What's your vision of today's world? And what is our necessity? What are the things we need to think about now? Francois will now take the I don't know. Okay.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the floor. Hello, everyone. Congratulations for the organization of this great event that becomes really an important moment. And outside of the Parisian microcosm, I think it feels very nice to feel outside of Paris and to meet here in Toulon. Of course, this is here in Toulon, where France looking at the Mediterranean. This is as also here the invitation of the Foundation for Mediterranean Strategic Studies. We're opening this 4th edition of the RSM Med. This has become a place for thinking, a place where we talk about the world without any illusions, but without renouncing either. This is here where we see the French lucidity. This is the symbol of our national unity, which crosses the memory and the future. Everything reminds us of future and history at the same time. Toulon is the harbor where the slaves transited from. It's also the port of youth and innovation. The Mediterranean is the theater of the world and the conscience of history. The Mediterranean is not only a sea, it is a wound and a promise at the same time. A wound because it carries in itself the trace of the war, of exiles and shipwrecks and religious divides, and a promise because it's so the three monotheist religion, and they know that man is not doomed to hate. The sea that is at the same time spiritual and very very real, has seen everything go by. There's been the cradle of civilization, empires, and philosophies. And this is why it is much more than a geographical space. It's a moral space where humanity wonders on its future and its destiny. Today, the Mediterranean concentrates all the divides of the modern world, the wars that we can see and those that we cannot see, the forced migrations, the climate deregulation, the identity ruptures, the manipulations, and sometimes the loss of the meaning of the truth, as you reminded us of. But it also remains a place of a very fragile balance where reason and memory are still trying to talk to each other. Paul Valéry was writing the Mediterranean is 100 things at the same time. It's not just a landscape, it's this moving space where everything is starting again. Yes, everything is starting again, the exchanges, the rebirth. And in this sea of the world, France must keep its place, the place of a balance, power, a universal message, uniting strengths and freedom. So the FMES is turning into the cradle of French strategic thinking. The foundation, the Mediterranean Foundation for Strategic Research, is one of the consciences that is the more enlightened in the Mediterranean. Under your authority, Admiral Pascal Ausseur, it knew how to make a link between the army, the research, the academia, the young ones. As you could see, the full house that we have in this amphitheater this morning, that shows the right thing that they're doing. It's not only an institute, it is a school of lucidity, a place where you make yourself and where we forge this conscience, the French strategic conscience. It teaches vigilance, critical thinking, those virtues that are the most precious tools in our societies. It understood before anybody else that security is not to be declared, it has to be thought, it has to be shared, it has to be protected. And in times where disinformation is making everybody doubtful, we have cyber attacks, reputational attacks, undermine confidence, the FMES is acting as a safeguard. It defends this idea that of a nation that thinks, there's a nation that can defend itself. As Raymond Aron said, thinking war is already acting for peace. It's a necessity with the return of dignity of people. We're living the revival of tragedy in history. The high-level war is not just a scenario. It has come back to strike Europe, remind the world that peace is never granted and that freedom has to be defended every day. Hostages, some hostages are waiting in silence. Some families are hoping. Children see the world crumbling in front of their eyes before they even understand it. The people, the free peoples, don't have the right to be naive. The world belongs to those who watch. And to watch the world is to refuse moral confusion. It's about protecting and keeping alive the higher part of ourselves, the one that makes a difference between suspicion and vigilance, and the refusal to impose the others' wars in our own country and to join in the anger of the world. It's about fighting those who want to transform our convictions and divides. And watching out means also be able to show compassion, because compassion is not a weakness. It is the mark of strong people, the ones who know how to cry without giving up, holding out a hand without not defending themselves. Compassion is the world's conscience when the world is shaking. It reminds us what we're fighting for: human dignity, justice, and freedom. The General de Gaulle said it, France is only itself when it's in the first front of fighting for the world. This sentence is still very true today, because in the world's chaos, freedom has become a spiritual battle as much as a military one. Here, we have made the choice of an economy for defense, for territorial defense. In face of those challenges, the Région Sud, the South region, is acting. We have made out of defense not a speech, but a real policy. First region in France in terms of the staff from the Ministry of the Military of the Army. First, also to have signed a convention with the Ministry of the Army. The South region has chosen to assume its role of a region and a sovereignty. We have built a policy, long-term policy, and we have also to support the military base and to also support the development of strategic sectors, to reinforce the trainings, industrial trainings, and military trainings. With the DGSA, we have created the journey, what we call the defense journey, to help our companies to cooperate, to export, to innovate, and to protect themselves. And we'll soon cross a new milestone. This is a new milestone, the operation of in national interest for security and defense. We have made the choice of being powerful by being united, an ecosystem dedicated to the armed forces and dedicated to the industrials and to the sovereignty, to build the industrial sovereignty of the future. Joint funding from the state, from the region, and from Europe will give this region the strengths of its ambitions, because sovereignty is not just a concept. It implies a whole change of value of competences, skills, and the South region must play its role. It must be the Mediterranean lab of the French power. But the power of a nation does not lie with its arms and its weapons. It also measures by the clarity of a mind. Over 800 high school teachers are signing up for those meetings. And your generation haven't lived the war, but you already understand what it means in the cost of life, in the fragility of the democracies that we live in, and in the war of information. Because before courage, we have clarity. Before strength, we need to have conscience. So the rearming of the intellectual rearmament that the FMS talked about is to give back the keys to you, the tools to find out what is true, to know what collective means, to be proud to belong to a nation that acts. And in this very uncertain world, the first place to fight is conscience. The 21st century is being played here now in this internal sea that unites three continents, three different ways of thinking, between Athens and Jerusalem, between Rhodes and Cairo, between Marseille and Tangiers. This is here that cross the roads of faith, commerce, and power. This is here we fight the democracies, where we have to fight against authoritarian empires. This is where we're going to depend. We're going to also play on our new dependence, maritime, and this is also where the destiny of Europe is being played. In the sea, France must become what it should never have ceased to be, a power of balance, dialogue, sovereignty. The president, Mr. Muselier, often says it, the South is France in all its truth, open, fierce, bold, and with a clear head. With this strengths, we don't give in to fear, and we believe in national cohesion, in memory, in transmission. Here in the South, we know that security is also the continuity of a legacy, the legacy of faith, courage, service, faith. So yes, of course, we're living through tough times, but it doesn't forbid us from standing tall. And vigilance is not fear; it's the modern form of courage. The world today is reminding us of suffering and chaos, but also of fraternity and promises. Thank you to the FMES to embody that. Thank you to the armies to serve this faith. Thank you to the youth to pick it up. And thank you to Toulon to give us this morning a new face. Before taking the floor, I would like to greet the deputy, the MP Chenvar, who actually supported this event with the department, département, the region. It's an honor for the region to be able to be on your side throughout this fourth edition of the meeting. First of all, I would like to excuse Mr. Henri Vasson, who's the president of the Conseil départemental. He's held with another agenda. He's held up. And I would like to thank the FMS and his president and his vice director, Pascal Ausseur, and all of the partners who are gathered today and to open this unique event on strategy in the Mediterranean, but also to the rest of the world. So we need to decipher to understand. This is the mantra of all of you representing army and operational actors, institutions, the academia, research, technological actors, and also decision makers who want to be enlightened on the disruption of the world today. With over 3,200 participants for this 2025 edition, the strategic meetings have imposed themselves as the place to meet and to think about geopolitics around the Mediterranean, but more largely the regional influences that have become more and more complex. This is also the opportunity to confront the different point of views and to wonder on our defense doctrine, today impacted directly by the hybrid war, disinformation, new threats. But your topic is not the war as much as us, politicians, because we don't mobilize on the risk, and we know more and more often risks that because our society is becoming more and more fractured, we have to protect the residents and the citizens, and this is a very strong expectations from the citizens. What society do we want for tomorrow? How can we restore trust for the French, for the people from the Var region, for the civil society, our economy, our infrastructures, and our public services? We need them to be strong as the armies over time. All these questions are really what we will be discussing over those 2 days of exchanges on themes that are all very precise and technical with very high-level keynote speakers. We have many learnings to retain from those 2 days. I would like to conclude by saying that the strategic meetings contribute to a goal that is very close to my heart, to make the VAR department shine. This this shining of the region is based on environment, tourism, and agriculture, of course, but on a defense economy that is very strong and very important for our industrial tissue of the region, which gives a very big importance to the armed force. So we have a convention, specific convention with the army, and we'll continue to do that in the high schools and universities and research to make sure that the high number of students in the VAR could carry on their studies of engineers in the department and then join our local companies. All of this is being prepared today. You are showing us the rich experience that we have, and that to make sure that France remains a strong actor in the geopolitical world and balance. I wish you all a very fruitful 2 days and to learn from each other. Thank you very much.
I
think I'm going to take this mic. First of all, I'd like to thank Pascal and all the team of FMES for this new event that shows success. We're delighted to have been part of it from the beginning. Everything was said in your three speeches, and what I'd like to try to bring to this table is from the point of view of a research center, the Foundation for Strategic Research. That was the first question that you asked, Pascal, is why we're here this morning. And listening to what you just said, I'm thinking that as the director of the Foundation for Strategic Research, this is one of the major goals that we can have. One of the contributions that we can bring to the public debate is how to avoid strategic surprise in a world that is being disrupted. This is the challenge, isn't it? And that reminds me that after World War II, when the ballistic missiles had the nuclear tool or weapon, we thought we could put one in the US. And there's a report that came out that was like, avoid the surprise attack. And there was a complete disruption and a complete change of paradigm for all of the community, not only the military community, but all the society. So finally, what are those disruptions from our point of view as researchers? First of all, we're talking about geopolitical disruptions. We talked about it. These are conflicts on the doorstep of Europe. This is an intrication of different places where people fight. They don't only fight regionally, they fight now. The fights are now international, and the speed at which they propagate and the information propagates accentuates, of course, this phenomenon. And at the end of the day, it is also a realignment of the international system with a modification of the fundamental balances in the world. You mentioned what's going to happen with the U.S. in tomorrow and the rupture between the East and the West, and we don't have answers on all that. And if we take it one step further, it's a complete reevaluation of the system in its moral and political principles. We talked about fake news and the post-truth. Where's the morals? And what politics should do to save morals. This is a geopolitical disruption that is very deep content and that affects us tremendously. This is a complete shift that we're going through. This is also a disruption of societies, and this goes hand in hand with a geopolitical disruption. It's a society of hyperconnection. People are hyperconnected, and that influences the state's behavior and also the conflicts themselves. We mix the military with sales, with there's some crazy characters who play a role in those, or blurry characters who play roles in those conflicts. So this is very important. And behind the propaganda, the fake news are turning into state policies. Fake news this is a new element of the set of weapons of public actions, and we need to keep that in mind. We may feel sorry about it, but it's a reality that we cannot overlook. So this is a new frame of mind for the public action that we need to adopt. Climate change, energy safety, we could have to integrate that as factors of public action. And also, and this is something that we look at, it's the technological disruptions. They're at the same time the consequence and triggers of those movements, whether about cybersecurity, AI, networks, that influence directly, not only indirectly, but directly, the strengths, the relations of powers in the world. They have an effect on the way we make decisions and the way we act. AI today, how far AI will have to go along human thinking in our operations, not only in the way we steer military operations, but how we define military strategies. We have digitalization is everywhere. We have automated systems, autonomous systems, and it conditions our strategic behavior. And this is really another trend that we need to face, and that implies to have the right tools to do so. It transforms the industrial landscape of defense. This increased digitalization and AI are new actors that play a role in something that was fairly stable in the past, in a landscape that was stable in the past. It creates new energy dependencies. We have new dependency towards the supply chain. It's not the same actors that make up the supply chain of the defense industry today. So it's not the same weaknesses, it's not the same gaps that we have. And so it also creates new places of fighting, strategic conflicts. We have new dependencies, geopolitical dependency in terms of resources. Today you'll hear about rare metals, about rare earth. This is all going to introduce a new global geopolicy. All of this is linked. Nothing is isolated. And that's a major difficulty of the world we live in. So we are looking at things and at disruptions that beyond the idea that we have of those disruptions, because it makes us a bit dependent on the speed of renewal of information, which means that finally we feel that information today, whether it's on conflicts or the balance of power, it's like mosquitoes, on your windshield when you drive on the motorway. It's the same thing. Sometimes you have to stop along the way, and if you go less fast, you have less mosquitoes crashing onto your windshield. So we have to think about that, and we shouldn't be dependent on the tempo, the very fast pace of information that we have today. We need to be aware of that. The next question will be what to do in front of that. And this is the idea that you defend today, Pascal. Thank you very much, Xavier. Thank you to the three of you. I retain two thoughts of what I heard so far. The first one is the huge spectrum that interact among themselves and have an impact on the new geopolitical landscape. And you're going to find all the points that we mentioned this morning. It's hard to be everywhere. It's actually impossible. So you're gonna have to pick the conferences that you find the most interesting. Maybe you can see the other ones on replay. The second idea is all of this is not just theory, it's not abstract, and you know it all because you're here in this room, is not just the business of diplomats, of militaries, of politicians, or people who just gravitate in this environment. It touches the lives of everybody because those interactions impact our individual lives wherever we are, in Toulon, in La Londe la Mort, in Paris, or in Brest, or anywhere else in the world, actually. And this is the reason why it's very comforting to see some political leaders who are anchored in their own region who give us their vision of what's going on, because at the end of the day, the young high school students, the young professionals, or the young people looking for a job, or the less young, by the way, looking for jobs. This is everybody, right? Who will be facing those issues and those evolutions. It starts with inflation, with the food scarcity, by jobs scarcity, competition on the workplace, disinformation, and the understanding of the world that we have today, and the relationship that you have with your neighbor. And they're taken hostage by the geopolitical balances that we have around us, of countries that we have around us, because it shapes our vision of the world and our capacity to live together. So this strange mix is very relevant. The second question is, once we take stock of the situation, it's not always good, but it's particularly seen from Europe, because I've spoken already on the shores of the Caucasus, and the young people from the south bank of the Caucasus, they came up to the same conclusion, but they were delighted. So it's all a question of perspective. But for a European or for a French person, it's a bit unsettling. My second question would be, what can we do? And there are no lessons to be given here, but since we have 2 days of thinking, can we have a few leads for thinking on this team? Xavier. Thank you for this question. I can answer quickly. I'm going to just say that, give you my opinion as the director of the Foundation for Strategic Research, and to give my view of the major tipping points in terms of technology that will have immediate effect or long-term effect. If I stick to that view, because one of the major challenges of the day is to combine different perspectives, geopolitical, but also technological and industrial, and this is going faster and faster. And that would be more an answer oriented on reflections that we'll have on innovation and technologies. Is first, we need to keep up the innovation at a good level in terms of economic organization, but in our minds as well. We need to adapt constantly. So how can we adapt without giving up on who we are and keeping our values and our moral compass? It's not that simple today. We could see that the geopolitical balance is affected by a disruption in the moral values, but we have an identity. We are the old Europe, and we all adhere to a common framework with the principles of law, for example, moral values, and we need to keep that as soon as we talk about technology, because this is going to be the beacon guiding us in this darkness. So we need to identify R&D leads that are specific with a high strategic value. This is what we need to do, and I'm talking about the transformation of the industrial network, rethink where is the center of gravity, to invest long term in the technologies that will be the fundamental technologies to keep our strategic positioning. There's a cross-cutting theme of AI as well, but we talk about treating the weak signals, accelerated automation of systems. This is also encompasses a moral dimension, because we talk about automating the battlefield. What does it mean? It's already starting with all the networks and AI that is entering the technical communication system, what we call the C2 systems, the logistics system, and we see all those changes coming to play. A lot of things, spatial industry also is affected. But all of this matters, but we also need to develop a specific environment that is going to promote an environment of technological disruption. It means working on research way beyond defense, the defense sector. We probably need today a structure to allow the world of research to look at sovereignty objectives. We have those organizations, defense organizations, that are going to measure scientific progress. we need also the civil society to look at those issues of sovereignty. So this is stuff that we could work on. It concerns research, it concerns industry. We need to provide this information tools, these tools and uses in the armies. So all these efforts have to be made together. They have to be joint efforts. So we need a bit of technological efforts, but organizational efforts as well. And we need to better organize our society. If we realize that we're facing a disruption within societies, and this is part of the answer, we need to rethink the real true organization of the society at the regional level, at the national level, at the European level, and maybe, and this is how we'll create critical masses at the international level. We need to adapt and in our defense planning strategy. Deterrence, nuclear deterrence, and remain credible and relevant. I'm not going to, tell you about all these options that we need to work on, but we need to have a prospect of resistance and resilience. First, you need to resist, and then resilience comes in. So all of this needs to be organized and thought in a very global manner and with different matrices, maybe. Cyber resilience also implies, the sovereignty of the France and their political decisions and the industrial agreements. And we need also to reevaluate the sovereignty of decision, autonomy of appreciation of a situation when it's even hard just to understand the information. So here are a few leads that we've been tackling since these first Mediterranean meetings, with all these cross-cutting themes and the link with the geopolitical situation. So this is just a part of the answer, but there's a lot of work to do, and this is what's fascinating about it.
I think another thing that's important is to reestablish confidence and trust between the different states and between the different local collectivities. When we talk about decentralization, for example, there's a real rupture between the elites, what we call, and the average French people. And over the past 5 years, we've never had gotten together as much for these types of debates and these meetings as we're having today, which means that we need to understand why things are changing. We need to understand what's going on. But also with the health crisis also changed a lot of things as well. And we realize now today that everyone thinks there's a specialist in everything. They're specialists in how to manage health crises, specialists in geopolitics, in every subject. And yet, if we look at the past 5 years, we also like to have many more meetings and people get together. People understand they need to get together to talk, to understand each other. We need to reestablish this trust, which is so necessary for our country. And also be able to count on our scientists and our specialists and our political leaders. These are the issues that we need to talk about. And these are the important aspects for the society of tomorrow. So it's very important that we be here to all work together, and it's important for us to work together with the FMES. First, I think it's important to have a political stability as quickly as possible, to have a budget. Because when we talk about the defense strategy, we'll need to have a budget, of course. I see there's a lot of members of industry here today who I've talked about, and I know many of you are worried about this, and we really need stability. And I liked your idea of the mosquitoes on the windshield of a car. As I said, as the mayor, is that the mosquito's now gotten inside the car, and once he gets inside the car, it gets difficult to handle. So today we have to reorganize. We have to defend our values. We have to talk about sovereignty. And that's why the South region has immediately, through President Muselier, gotten people together to make a major commitment. And it's a major commitment that we cannot set aside because of the current situation. As I said, we are going to be implementing the regional interest of the defense. What we want to do is bring people together and to train and finance people, and that we all talk together around the table so that we have a common point of view and that we can all handle challenges together. But the real problem is that the question itself is very complicated. Who has the answer? Who has the answers today? It's not me. It's not Guillaume. It's not you. It's maybe you, Admiral, but I'm not sure you either have the answer. Thank you, Francois. I don't think I have the answers either. I can't claim that. And again, that's not the way we are that's not the way we look at things at RS Med. I'm not going to make some big discussion, big speech about with all the problems. I don't want to close out our debates before they've even gotten started. That's not the spirit behind what we do here, and that has no meaning to us. So we're not gurus who are going to tell you what to think. On the contrary, the goal is to collectively think together that we all leave here a little bit more intelligent than we were on this first morning here today. But there's something that really strikes me about what was said, and I think it's really something we see today a lot, is that in a world where we have these centrifugal forces which are pulling us apart, not only individually but also collectively, the question of links and working together is a real challenge today. It's not easy to do. And when we talk with people who ask the same questions that we're asking today all around the world, that's one of the things I do as part of my job. The question of identity, the question of regional and local collective identity is something that comes up very quickly in my discussions. People say, we are us, and we're different from you. How to say we, who we are, is becoming more and more difficult. And it's a challenge for our societies today because we have to go beyond the we. We wanted to talk about a we, a worldwide we. And at the same time, we were talking about a I, which is at the local level. So everything's getting mixed up. So we have to talk about this we, who we are, in order to work together in all these different areas that we've talked about, and also to live together. Because we are social animals, we're political animals, we need each other to live. That's how Homo sapiens survives on this planet. So we have to recreate a we, and that's a big challenge for us. And that brings up a lot of what we talked about, what all of my three guests here have been talking about. And also tomorrow, all of us, whether we're political leaders, whether we're economic or political leaders or business leaders, or just simple citizens, it's a question we all need to ask ourselves. If we want to talk about what we need to do, what we do at the FMES is what we talk about above all is the intellectual challenges we're facing. Marc Bloch in The Strange Defeat says we lost the war. This was the war in 1940. We lost the war because we didn't understand what was happening. He didn't necessarily say in that way, but that's exactly what his book says, which is an amazing book, which I recommend all of you should read. It makes you want to think, because it's great to be courageous. It's great to be very strong, very rich. But if you don't understand, you die. You don't adapt. And in this Darwinian world in which we live, if you don't adapt, you're not going to survive. So it's an intellectual challenge, first of all. And it's not very easy because we were on a very natural curve for 2 generations now, at least. We knew where we were going, more or less. It was the continuation of 2 centuries of the Industrial Revolution and development throughout the world. We were taught, we knew how the economy worked, how to govern the different countries. There was very little change in some respects. There were crises, of course, but we knew how to get over those. But now we don't know how to manage that anymore. There's so many different potential futures that are so different one from another, and there are many are not very positive, is something we have to take in mind. Many of these futures are positive, though. Everything's not necessarily negative, especially in the Mediterranean basin and for our neighbors. So we don't have to be too pessimistic, but we're going to have to work, intellectually speaking. And we also have to talk about the social networks, and we have to talk about how our societies are organized and how people have a much more of a culture based on leisure time and on networking. And this is something we need to work on as well. And that's one of the goals of RS Med. How we can think together, share our opinions and our different points of view. Also learn how to accept if people don't agree with us. And accept that maybe we make mistakes. Maybe we make mistakes in things we thought. Accept to talk about subjects which can draw a lot of emotion out of us. We're not computers. We have emotions as well. So we have to talk about subjects which we may don't want to talk about. We're not just a brain. We have a heart and a stomach, as Plato said. We have other interests, which is a stomach. We have a heart, which is emotions. And we have a brain, which is the rationality and logic. So today, the heart, because we work a lot on images that we see on the internet and in networks, Our emotion, when we see with our heart, when we see these images, when a child dies, this works on our emotions. Unless you're a psychopath, when you see these horrible pictures, it's going to work on your emotional level, which is normal. So it's easy to manipulate us then. You press a button and you can see a picture, and that definitely triggers emotions. But emotions can't handle all our problems. We are emotional creatures. That's normal. The subjects we're going to be talking about of these new twos are things that are going to draw out a lot of emotions, and that's normal. We can hate something. We can love something. You can hate certain people or certain ideas. That's normal. That's emotion. But at certain points, you have to make your brain work. And that's what RS Med is for. It's to make us get our brains working. And it's not as easy as you think. And this is something I want to talk about the younger people here today. You can talk about people that you don't agree with, who you hate or you don't like. You can even come to an agreement with the people that you don't like. And we can help people who don't think like us, who might not vote like us. It is possible. And you can even hate people who actually vote the same way as you do. That's possible as well. As I said last year, and this is something I've read recently, and it's something, sorry, I'll be harping on this as we go along, is talking about Plato. It's something he wrote 2,500 years ago. Plato, who talked about Socrates, who talked about sophists. Sophists didn't believe in everything. There's no truth. They're relatives. Everything is true. If I can argument something, it's true. The battle was a battle of ideas and the battle of who's the best speaker. And we can defend any point of view. The truth doesn't exist. Everything, we can defend anything. And so Socrates said, that's not true. The truth does exist. It's complicated. It's something we can't reach, but truth does exist. And it's something we can get a notion of. And there are a few concepts he said we need to concentrate on. One, the first is, our objective is to get closer to the truth. That means the goal is not to win the battle. It's not to win our verbal jousting. What we want is to get closer to the truth collectively. Even if we start with different points of views, even if we don't manage to convince each other, we're going to describe the world from different points of views. And in the end, it's for all of us and all of those who listen to us that we all have a vision that is a little closer to the reality of the world. That's our first point. The second point is to accept to be refuted. Accept that someone refutes your point of view. Accept that someone says, no, if I think it's white, I'd say, no, I think it's black. Okay, well, I have to accept that, which is not easy. People also have to be competent. They have to know what they're talking about. You mentioned about it earlier. Intelligent means to talk about what you know. And you'll see in the panels, you have some of the most competent and the best people or the most best specialists in the world in the area they talk about. And that's a key to our discussions as well. Socrates also says, this is Plato who says what Socrates says, you also need to have kindness. You have to accept that the person who doesn't agree with you, you have to be benevolent in the way you look at them. Don't think of them as an adversary. Think of them as another human being who's trying to also teach you their truth, even if they don't think like you. Kindness is also, benevolence is also something important. This is maybe something our grandparents knew about, but this is harder today. And this is something you might ask the younger people in the audience today. Is there a lot of kindness in the discussions we see on the networks, social networks today? Sorry, but I don't think so. And the final point, which is, again, talking about Plato in the Gorgias, the Georgics of Plato, is to be frank and to be clear and on it. Just say the truth. Don't try to hide behind words. Say things bluntly. Say things directly, what you think. Say what you think. Frank discussion is one of the goals of RS Med. And this is something here in 2025, and also something that Socrates and Plato said better than I did 2,500 years ago. It's kind of the anti-social networks. At RS Med, you're going to spend 2 days without the social network attitude, I might say. And a final point I'd like to say, I know I'm getting late behind schedule, but it's something I think is important. It's the notion of lies and deceit. A few weeks ago, something happened to me. I found a book. It was called The Revolution and Lies, Révolution Mensonge. It's a book that I would definitely recommend to you. This was written by a Soviet dissident who ended up in the Gulag and was extradited and wrote a book called the Gulag Archipelago. And his idea of Solzhenitsyn is the Russia fell because it was based on lies. Everyone lied to everybody else. We lied because we were afraid. We lied because of ideology. We lied because of fear. We lied by convention because we got in the habit. We lied because people follow each other. We lied because we said what everyone else was saying. You couldn't imagine the individual corrective and collective corruption that represents. And it was a society that was dead. And it died without a single shot being fired. We thought there'd be maybe a revolution in the USSR. There wasn't. Why? Because the system was based on lies. And in a world of sophists, where people don't think there's any truth and think they can say whatever they want, a world post-truth, a world that the President of the Republic can say something that everyone knows is a lie. I'm not talking about in France. I don't want to do this isn't to talk about politics here. And if someone says, if the president of a country says, it's my truth, but everyone knows it's a lie and no one says it, we're based on lies. And we knew as citizens, we have to ask questions and say, are we in a world of lies or not? If we are in a world based on lies, then things are going to go very badly for us. And this is something in these 2 days at RSMed, this is an opportunity for us to get closer to this truth. And I hope at the closing session 2 days, you will agree with me that says we've made progress and we've gotten closer to better truth. And I'd like to thank you, and I hope you have a very good RSMed discussions over the next 2 days.